Picture this, a single comment made during a postgame interview. 45 seconds of a player being asked a question, giving an answer, and then walking away. That's it. But within 60 minutes, that clip was everywhere, trending in 2 different countries. Politicians were being tagged. Memes were flying across the internet at a speed that made it impossible to keep up. Millions of people were laughing, sharing, and adding their own commentary to what became one of the most viral moments in recent WNBA history. On the surface, it's funny, genuinely funny. The kind of moment that gets clipped, reposted, and becomes part of sports culture for weeks to come. But here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about, the detail that got buried under all the laughter and the jokes. Underneath that viral moment is something much darker. Something medical. Something that involves a player's health, a facility's negligence, and a decision that could have genuinely serious consequences. By the time you finish this video, you're going to understand why a casual comment about air conditioning is actually so much more than that. You're going to see what was really being said, what was really at stake, and why what happens next matters more than anyone is willing to admit right now. Let's set the scene. Tuesday night, August 18th. The Indiana Fever are heading to Toronto to take on the Toronto Tempo at Scotiabank Arena. This is early in the season, but not early enough that anyone's still treating it like preseason. Every game matters. Every win is being counted. Every loss stings a little bit more because the playoff picture is starting to come into focus, and you can already feel the intensity ramping up around the league. Now, the Fever aren't coming into this game as some middling team hoping to steal a road victory. They've got Caitlin Clark. They've got Kelsey Mitchell, who's been absolutely on fire. They've got momentum. They've got a backcourt that's being talked about as potentially the most dangerous scoring combination in the WNBA right now. Indiana's a threat every single night, and Toronto knows it. So the Tempo need to bring everything they've got. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody was prepared for. As the game goes on, as the minutes tick by and the action intensifies, something becomes increasingly obvious to everyone in that building. It's getting hotter. And not in the metaphorical sense of the team is playing hot. I mean physically, genuinely, uncomfortably hot. By the second half, Scotiabank Arena has basically turned into a sauna. And I'm not exaggerating here. Multiple players on both benches were literally fanning themselves during timeouts. You could see towels that were soaking through with sweat before they'd even been used for more than a couple of minutes. The kind of sweat that comes not just from running up and down the court, but from being in an environment that's just way too warm for anyone to be performing at a professional level. According to multiple accounts from people who were actually there, from reporters, from coaches, from anyone paying attention to the conditions in that arena, the on-court temperature was significantly above what any professional athlete should be performing in. We're talking about an environment that's not just uncomfortable, it's potentially dangerous. It's the kind of heat that affects performance, that affects decision-making, that affects how your body responds to physical exertion. For most of the game, the players adjusted. They dealt with it. They pushed through because that's what professional athletes do. They face adversity, they face uncomfortable conditions, and they find a way to perform anyway. It's part of the job. It's part of being a competitor at the highest level. But then something happened that changed everything. Late in the third quarter, a player checked out of the game and never came back. And not because of foul trouble. Not because of an injury that happened on the court. Not because the coach was resting someone before a crucial moment in the game. No, this player went to the locker room because she was overheating. That player was Kelsey Mitchell. And this is where you need to understand who Kelsey Mitchell is in the context of this season, because her presence or absence from the floor isn't just a small detail. Mitchell walked into that arena on an absolute tear. She was on a 20-game streak of scoring 20 or more points. 20 consecutive games. That's historic territory. That's the kind of stretch that gets talked about for years. She was the number 2 scorer in the entire WNBA at that point in the season, averaging 24.3 points per game. She was in the conversation for MVP caliber performance. She was carrying the Fever's offense on nights when everyone else was struggling. And now, because it was too hot in the building, she was gone. Head coach Stephanie White came to the microphone after the game and explained the situation as clearly as she could. Kelsey Mitchell checked out of the game late in the third quarter because she was overheating. That was the official diagnosis. That was what the medical team determined. That was why one of the league's most dominant scorers spent the fourth quarter in the locker room instead of on the court, chasing history. Think about what that means for a second. This isn't a torn ACL. This isn't a pulled hamstring. This isn't one of those injuries that happens in the split second of a game and sends a player to the sideline. This is a player being forced out of a game because the building she's supposed to be competing in can't maintain basic environmental standards for professional athletic competition. The Fever still won that night, 101-95. So on the surface, it was fine. They got the W, they moved on. The game went into the books as a victory, but everyone knew something was off about how that victory was achieved. And everyone knew that Kelsey Mitchell being out of the game, regardless of the final score, was a problem. Because this is the second leading scorer in the WNBA we're talking about. This is a player in the middle of a historic scoring run. This is a player who's supposed to be on the court in the fourth quarter when games are won and lost. And instead, she's in the locker room trying to cool down because the arena doesn't have adequate air conditioning. Right after the game ends, ESPN's Holly Rowe is doing post-game interviews. This is standard stuff. Players come off the court, they're still dripping with sweat, they're breathing hard, they're processing what just happened, and reporters ask them questions about the game, about the performance, about what comes next. Holly catches up with Caitlin Clark, and Clark is visibly uncomfortable. Not emotionally, I mean literally uncomfortable. She's soaked. Her jersey is dark with sweat. She's breathing hard. She's trying to catch her breath while also talking to a reporter. And Holly asks her about what happened with Mitchell, about the fact that her teammate had to leave the game because of the heat. And this is where Caitlin Clark in that moment delivers a line that's going to change the entire trajectory of this story. Holly asks her something about the conditions, about Mitchell, about what happened out there. And Clark, still dripping with sweat, looks directly at Holly and says this exact line. Well, maybe if Canada had air conditioning, Holly, that would probably be helpful. It's 1,000,000 degrees in here, but hopefully she'll be okay. We certainly miss her. That's it, that's the whole thing. 45 seconds of a post-game interview. A comment about air conditioning. A slight joke at Canada's expense. A genuine expression of concern for her teammate. And then she walks away. Within an hour, that clip was everywhere. I'm not talking about it being shared among WNBA fans. I'm not talking about it trending on Twitter for a couple of hours and then disappearing. I'm talking about this clip exploding across the entire internet. Within 60 minutes, it was being clipped, reposted, shared, memed, and spread across multiple platforms and multiple countries. Clips of that line were on every WNBA-related social media account. Fans were tagging Canadian politicians. People were making jokes about Canadian infrastructure. Memes were flying everywhere. One post that racked up tens of thousands of engagements just said, "She cooked the entire nation." As in, Caitlin Clark just made fun of an entire country on live television in front of millions of people, and she did it so smoothly, so casually, that it became instantly iconic. Holly Rowe herself, the reporter who asked the question and heard the line firsthand, reposted the clip on X with her own caption. She highlighted Clark's comment about Toronto, about the love-hate relationship or whatever, and then pointed out that aside from the air conditioning issue, it was all good vibes. The tweet went viral. Thousands and thousands of engagements, comments, reposts, people adding their own commentary. The clip became the kind of viral moment that transcends sports. It became a cultural moment. It became something that people who don't even watch the WNBA were sharing and laughing about. It became a meme. It became the kind of thing where, if you're on social media at all on that day and the next day, you're seeing it. You're seeing variations of it. You're seeing people riffing on it. And on the surface level, it's genuinely funny. You have to understand, Caitlin Clark has this delivery. She's got this tone of voice, this almost deadpan way of speaking, where you can't quite tell in the moment whether she's joking or whether she's genuinely annoyed. And the answer, honestly, is probably both. She's annoyed because her teammate just had to leave the game because of heat. She's annoyed because she's standing there soaking wet, uncomfortably hot, trying to do an interview. But she's also got this dry sense of humor, this ability to make light of a situation while also making a very pointed comment about what's actually wrong. So people laughed, and they should have laughed. It's funny. The delivery is perfect. The timing is perfect. The self-awareness is perfect. She's being funny while also being real about the situation. That's the kind of moment that goes viral because it hits on multiple levels. But here's where I want you to pause for a second, because this is the part where the story goes from funny viral moment to something much more serious. This is the part where you have to look past the memes, past the laughter, past the engagement numbers, and actually understand what was being said beneath the surface of that joke. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just make a funny comment about air conditioning. She was actually making a statement. She was actually pointing to a real problem. She was actually highlighting something that nobody else was willing to talk about out loud. And that brings us to the detail that almost nobody noticed. The detail that got buried under all the laughter. The detail that the internet scrolled right past because it was too busy making memes and jokes. The detail that, if you actually understand what it means medically, what it means for a player's health, what it means for the integrity of professional sports, becomes a whole lot less funny and a whole lot more serious. Kelsey Mitchell has a documented medical condition that most people have never heard of. It's called rhabdomyolysis, and if you don't know what that is, you need to understand it right now, because it's the detail that transforms this entire story from funny viral moment to potential medical crisis. Rhabdomyolysis, or rhabdo, as it's commonly called in medical and athletic circles, is a serious condition where your muscle fibers literally break down and release toxic proteins directly into your bloodstream. I'm not exaggerating the severity here. Your muscles are made up of fibers, and under normal circumstances, those fibers work together, contract, expand, and do what they're supposed to do. But when rhabdo occurs, those fibers start to deteriorate. They start to fall apart. And when they do, they release myoglobin and other toxic proteins into your blood. That's dangerous. That's genuinely dangerous, because those proteins can overwhelm your kidneys. They can cause kidney failure. They can cause all kinds of systemic problems throughout your body. In severe cases, rhabdomyolysis can be life-threatening. It's not something you just shake off. It's not something you tough out and move on from. So what causes rhabdomyolysis? There are actually several triggers. Extreme exertion is one of them, pushing your body way beyond what it's normally capable of doing intense physical activity that your body isn't prepared for. Dehydration is another major trigger. If you're not getting enough fluids, if your body is depleted of water and electrolytes, that increases your risk significantly. But here's the trigger that's relevant to this story: overheating. Heat is a major risk factor for rhabdomyolysis. When your body temperature gets too high, when you're in an environment that's excessively hot and you're also exerting yourself physically, that combination can trigger rhabdo. Your muscles start to break down. The condition develops. And suddenly, you've got a serious medical emergency on your hands. Now, Kelsey Mitchell has a documented history with this condition. And I'm not talking about something that maybe happened once, something that she had to deal with and then moved on from. This is something that's affected her career. This is something that she's had to manage. During the 2023 WNBA playoffs, specifically during Game 5 of the Fever's playoff series against Las Vegas last October, Mitchell experienced a rhabdomyolysis episode. And this wasn't mild. This wasn't something where she felt a little off and then got better. This was serious enough that she had to leave the game. This was serious enough that she had to be hospitalized. Mitchell has spoken publicly about how terrifying that experience was. She described the moment in interviews, talking about how her legs just stopped working. She said, "I panicked, like my legs just stopped working." Think about what that means. You're an elite professional athlete. You've trained your whole life. Your body is your instrument. And suddenly, in the middle of a playoff game, your legs stop responding. You can't make them work. You panic because you don't know what's happening, and your body is shutting down on you. She was hospitalized. She needed medical intervention. She needed weeks to recover. It wasn't a quick thing. It wasn't something where she missed a game or two and came back. This was a significant health event that required serious medical attention and a substantial recovery period. So now, fast forward to August in Toronto. Mitchell's in an arena that's excessively hot. She's playing professional basketball, which is intense physical exertion. She's probably not getting enough fluids because she's too busy playing the game. And she's in an environment where the temperature is way above what it should be. She's got all three triggers for rhabdomyolysis happening at the same time. All three. And then she starts feeling overheated. She checks out of the game. She goes to the locker room. The medical team evaluates her. Stephanie White says it was just overheating, just heat-related fatigue. But here's where you need to think about what just overheating means in the context of Kelsey Mitchell's medical history. Because a reporter, right after that game, asks Stephanie White directly about rhabdomyolysis. Is there concern about rhabdo recurring? Is there any possibility that this could be a rhabdomyolysis episode? And Stephanie White's response is interesting. She says, "It seems like she just got overheated. I mean, this is 2 games in a row where we played in really, really hot environments." And then, when pressed specifically about rhabdo, about whether there's any concern that this could be a recurrence, she says, "Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure." Now I want you to really listen to that answer. Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure. That's not a denial. That's not a coach saying, "No, we've ruled that out completely. She's fine. There's no concern about rhabdo." That's a coach choosing her words with surgical precision. That's someone who knows the medical team is still evaluating. That's someone who knows Mitchell's history makes this a potential crisis. That's someone who is not about to say, "She's fine," on the record, and have it age badly by the next morning if the medical tests come back and show something different. That non-answer tells you more than an actual answer would. And that's the detail that most people completely missed. Let's break down exactly what Stephanie White said and what she didn't say, because the difference between those two things is crucial to understanding what was actually happening in that building on Tuesday night. When a reporter asks her about the conditions, about why Mitchell had to leave the game, she confirms that it was overheating. That's straightforward. That's factual. Mitchell got too hot, and the medical team made the decision to remove her from the game as a precaution. That makes sense. That's good medical decision-making. You don't take unnecessary risks with a player's health, especially not in an environment that's already too hot. But then, a reporter follows up with a more specific question. Given Kelsey Mitchell's documented history with rhabdomyolysis, given that she had to be hospitalized with that condition just 10 months ago, is there any concern that this could be a rhabdo episode? Is the medical team checking for that? Is that a possibility you're considering? And Stephanie White at that moment has a choice. She can say, "No, we've completely ruled that out. The medical team has evaluated her. There's no indication of rhabdomyolysis. She just got too hot and we removed her as a precaution. She's fine." That would be a clear answer. That would be reassuring. That would put the entire situation to rest. But she doesn't say that. Instead, she says, "Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure." Think about the precision of that statement. Not that I'm aware of. That means, as far as she knows, based on the information she's received so far, there's no indication of rhabdomyolysis. But, and this is the important word, I'm not sure. That means she's acknowledging that the evaluation might not be complete. That means she's acknowledging that the medical team might still be running tests. That means she's acknowledging that this could potentially go in a different direction. That's not a coach who's confident in the diagnosis. That's not a coach who's certain everything's okay. That's a coach who's being very careful about what she says publicly, knowing that anything she states as fact could become a liability if the medical situation changes. Why would a coach do that? Why would she hedge her answer like that? There's only one reason: because she doesn't know. Because the evaluation isn't complete. Because the medical team is still checking things out, and she's not about to make definitive statements about a player's health status when there's still a possibility that the situation could be more serious than just overheating. This is the kind of statement that coaches make when they're protecting themselves legally, when they're being cautious about what they say on the record, when they know that a serious medical condition is on the table as a possibility. It's not the kind of answer you give when you're absolutely certain everything's fine. And here's another layer to this that's important. Stephanie White has access to all the medical information. She knows what the team doctors are thinking. She knows what tests they've run. She knows what Kelsey Mitchell is reporting about how she feels. She has all the inside information. And despite having all that information, despite being in the position where she could give a clear, reassuring answer if there was nothing to worry about, she chooses to say, "Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure." That's not a coincidence. That's not just casual language, that's deliberate. Now, I want to point out something else that White said that's equally important. She said, "This is 2 games in a row where we played in really, really hot environments." 2 games in a row. That means this wasn't an isolated incident. That means this wasn't just an unfortunate situation that happened one time in one building in Toronto. The Fever had just come from Atlanta, where they played at State Farm Arena. And according to White, State Farm Arena was also unusually warm. So Indiana played in a hot arena in Atlanta. Then they flew to Toronto. Then they played in another hot arena at Scotiabank Arena. 2 consecutive road games. 2 consecutive buildings where the temperature control was inadequate for professional athletic competition. That's a pattern. And patterns matter, especially when you're talking about a player with a documented medical condition that's triggered by heat. Think about what State Farm Arena is. It's an NBA venue. It's shared between the Atlanta Hawks and the Atlanta Falcons. It's a professional-grade building. And yet, apparently, in August, it couldn't maintain proper climate control for a WNBA game. Scotiabank Arena is the same situation. It's an NBA venue. It's shared between the Toronto Raptors and various other sports and entertainment events. It's not the permanent home of the Toronto Tempo, it's just a borrowed space. And apparently, it also couldn't maintain proper climate control for professional athletic competition. So we're talking about billion-dollar arenas, NBA-caliber facilities that couldn't keep their air conditioning working properly. That couldn't maintain a safe environment for professional athletes. 2 of them in a row. And here's where you need to understand the severity of this situation. Kelsey Mitchell has already had 1 rhabdomyolysis episode that was serious enough to hospitalize her. She already knows what that feels like. She already knows how dangerous it is. And now she's being put in situations, not once, but twice in a row, where the environmental conditions are creating risk factors for that condition to recur. That's not just uncomfortable. That's not just bad arena management. That's a potential medical crisis waiting to happen. That's the kind of situation where, if something serious does happen, people are going to look back at this moment and ask, how did nobody do anything about this? How did we let a player with a known condition that's triggered by heat play in 2 consecutive buildings where the air conditioning wasn't working? If you're a basketball history person, if you follow the NBA closely, there's a moment from the past that should be ringing a very loud bell right now. Because what's happening in the WNBA in August 2024 is not actually unprecedented. Something very similar happened 10 years ago in one of the biggest basketball events in the world. Go back to 2014, the NBA Finals, Game 1, San Antonio Spurs versus Miami Heat, the AT&T Center in San Antonio. This is one of the biggest stages in basketball. 2 powerhouse teams, LeBron James at the height of his career, championship on the line, everything that matters in professional basketball is concentrated in this one game. And in the middle of the game, something happens that nobody expected. LeBron James, arguably the most durable, most elite, most physically prepared athlete on the planet, goes down with severe leg cramps. Not an injury in the traditional sense, not a torn muscle or a ligament problem. Cramps. His legs are cramping up so badly that he can't continue playing. He has to leave the game. Why? Because the air conditioning system at the AT&T Center malfunctioned. The building got too hot. And even LeBron James, with all his physical conditioning, with all his preparation, with all his experience at the highest level, couldn't handle the environmental conditions. The repercussions of that moment were immediate and significant. The Spurs organization issued a formal public apology. They acknowledged that the facility conditions were subpar for professional basketball. The story dominated sports headlines for an entire week. It wasn't just a footnote in the finals coverage. It was the story. Everyone was talking about how the host city, the host arena, had failed to maintain proper conditions for the biggest basketball event in the world. And the NBA, as a league, made it very clear that this was not acceptable. They made it clear that facility conditions were a matter of competitive integrity. They made it clear that if an arena couldn't maintain proper environmental conditions, that was a problem that needed to be fixed immediately. They took it seriously. They treated it as a league-wide issue, not just a one-time incident. The reason they did that is because they understood something fundamental. When you're asking professional athletes to compete at the highest level, you have a responsibility to provide them with a safe, appropriate environment. When facility conditions deteriorate to the point where they're affecting performance, affecting health, forcing players out of games, that's not just bad management. That's a threat to the integrity of the sport itself. Now, let me be very clear about something. The cramps that LeBron James experienced in 2014, as serious and as shocking as that moment was, are not in the same category of medical severity as rhabdomyolysis. Cramps are uncomfortable. They can affect performance. They can force a player out of a game temporarily. But rhabdomyolysis is a life-threatening condition. It can cause organ failure. It can cause permanent damage. It can be genuinely dangerous to a player's long-term health. And yet, what happened in Toronto in August 2024, what happened in Atlanta the game before that, these incidents generated a fraction of the attention that the 2014 finals incident generated. Nobody issued a formal apology. Nobody from the league office made a statement about facility conditions being a competitive integrity issue. The viral moment was the joke about air conditioning, not the serious medical concern underneath it. The difference in response is striking, and it tells you something about how the WNBA is perceived versus how the NBA is perceived. When LeBron James can't play because the building is too hot, it's treated as a crisis. When Kelsey Mitchell can't play because the building is too hot, it's treated as a punchline. But here's the thing that should concern everyone. The medical stakes in this situation are actually higher than they were in 2014. In 2014, it was cramps. Serious enough to remove a player from the game, but not life-threatening. In 2024, we're talking about a player with a documented medical condition that can cause organ failure, hospitalization, and serious long-term health consequences. If the league took facility conditions seriously in 2014, when LeBron James got cramps, shouldn't they be taking facility conditions even more seriously now? When a player with a rhabdomyolysis history is being exposed to heat risk factors in consecutive games. Here's where the story gets even bigger, because what's happening in Toronto isn't just about one player or one game. It's about the entire future direction of the WNBA. The league is in the middle of the most consequential expansion cycle in its entire history. Toronto just joined as an expansion team. Portland is coming. There are other markets being considered. The entire business strategy of the WNBA right now is built on the idea that the league is ready to grow, ready to expand into new markets, ready to prove that it can sustain itself in cities beyond the original franchises. And the sales pitch to new markets is very specific. The pitch is that this product is ready for prime time, that the WNBA can fill NBA-caliber arenas, that the league can deliver NBA-caliber experiences, that when you bring WNBA basketball to your city, you're getting a world-class sports product that's comparable to any other major league in North America. That's a big promise. That's a significant claim, but it's the claim that has to be true for expansion to work. It's the claim that has to be true for the business model to succeed. It's the claim that has to be true for owners to invest in new franchises, and for cities to build the infrastructure to support them. But if the expansion venues can't even guarantee basic climate control, if a brand new arena in a major North American city can't keep the air conditioning working properly in August, that's a problem. That's not a primetime product. That's not an NBA caliber experience. That's a liability. That's a question mark hanging over the entire expansion strategy. Because if you're a potential owner looking at a new WNBA franchise and you see that basic facility conditions, air conditioning, climate control, aren't being maintained properly, that's a red flag. That's a sign that maybe the infrastructure isn't ready. That maybe the market isn't prepared to host professional basketball at this level. That maybe the investment isn't worth the risk. And if you're a city considering bringing a WNBA team, and you see that existing NBA arenas that are supposed to be world-class facilities, can't handle WNBA games properly, that's also a red flag. That's a sign that maybe you need to invest in facility upgrades. That maybe the existing infrastructure isn't sufficient. That maybe this is going to be more complicated and expensive than you thought. Scotiabank Arena isn't even the Tempo's permanent home court. It's a shared NBA venue, borrowed for WNBA games. State Farm Arena in Atlanta is the same situation, an existing NBA arena being shared for WNBA games. If the league is going to survive and thrive with expansion teams, it needs to figure out how to maintain these facilities properly. It needs to guarantee that the playing conditions are safe and appropriate for professional athletic competition. But more than that, it needs to understand what's at stake, because this isn't just about comfort. This isn't just about making sure players aren't sweating too much. This is about player health and safety. This is about a documented medical condition that can be triggered by heat exposure. This is about the league's responsibility to protect its players while they're competing. The expansion pitch falls apart if facility conditions are a concern. The expansion pitch falls apart if basic infrastructure isn't working properly. The expansion pitch falls apart if players are being forced out of games because buildings can't maintain proper climate control. Now here's where I want you to really understand what Caitlin Clark did in that post-game interview, because it's much more sophisticated than just making a funny joke about air conditioning. On the surface level, she made a quip. She made a joke about Canada not having air conditioning. She got a laugh from Holly Rowe. The clip went viral. Millions of people saw it and laughed. It became a meme. It became cultural content that transcended basketball. But if you look deeper at what she actually did, if you understand the mechanics of how she delivered that message, you start to realize that Clark was being very strategic about her approach. She was being very deliberate about how she criticized the situation. First, let's talk about what she didn't do. She didn't go after the Tempo organization by name. She didn't say, "The Toronto Tempo need to fix their arena." She didn't make it a direct accusation toward the team or the ownership group. She didn't blame the league directly. She didn't say, "The WNBA needs to do a better job of ensuring facility conditions are appropriate." Instead, she wrapped a genuinely sharp criticism, a pointed commentary on the failure of basic facility management, inside a joke about an entire country. She made it funny. She made it lighthearted. She made it the kind of thing that people would laugh about rather than get angry about. And here's the genius part. By framing it as comedy instead of as an accusation, she made it go viral. The clip went viral as a funny moment, not as an accusation of negligence. People shared it because it was funny. They shared it because Caitlin Clark had good comedic timing. They shared it because it was a clever quip. They shared it because it was the kind of moment that becomes part of sports culture. But the message landed exactly where it needed to land. Every facility manager for every WNBA arena saw that clip. The league office saw that clip. The broadcast network saw that clip. The team owners saw that clip. Everyone who's involved in maintaining these buildings, who's involved in making decisions about facility conditions, they all saw a clip of a superstar player calling out the air conditioning in front of millions of people. And that matters. That's leverage. That's the kind of pressure that actually gets things fixed. Because now, every facility manager knows that if their arena isn't properly maintained, if the conditions aren't right, there's a chance that a player is going to make them look bad on a national broadcast. There's a chance that millions of people are going to see that criticism. There's a chance that it's going to become a meme, a cultural moment, something that follows the team and the organization. That's how you actually get change in these situations. Not through formal complaints, not through official channels, through public pressure, through the kind of scrutiny that comes from a superstar player saying something on the record with her name attached in front of millions of people. And that's what Clark did. She spoke directly. She spoke publicly. She spoke with her name attached. She didn't hide behind anonymity. She didn't make vague criticisms. She said specifically that the arena doesn't have air conditioning and that it's 1,000,000 degrees in there. The next time Indiana plays a road game in a building that can't hold 68 degrees, someone is going to remember that Caitlin Clark made them a punchline in front of millions of people. That's not just a quip. That's leverage deployed as humor. That's strategy. That's understanding how public pressure works. That's understanding how to make a point in a way that actually reaches the people who can fix the problem, while framing it in a way that the message gets amplified through social media instead of buried as controversy. But here's where I want to be real with you about what actually concerns me, about what should concern everyone who's paying attention to this situation. Stephanie White said she wasn't sure about rhabdomyolysis. That's not a reassuring statement. That's a statement that leaves the door open for the situation to be more serious than the initial diagnosis suggested. Kelsey Mitchell's status for the next game on Thursday is unknown. She didn't play in Toronto. She went to the locker room. The medical team evaluated her. Stephanie White said it was just overheating. But we don't actually know the full scope of what the medical testing revealed. We don't actually know whether there's any indication of rhabdomyolysis. We don't actually know what the team doctors are finding in their evaluations. And meanwhile, the Fever's schedule is brutal. Their next 5 games include Dallas on Thursday, 2 games against the Sun, and a rematch with Toronto. That's a gauntlet. That's a difficult stretch of the season. That's when having your number 2 scorer available is absolutely critical. If Kelsey Mitchell misses time because of a rhabdomyolysis scare in an overheated arena, that's one thing. That's a player being cautious about her health after a previous serious episode. That's medical prudence. But if she misses time because a billion-dollar arena, an NBA-caliber facility in a major North American city, couldn't run the air conditioning properly in August, that's not just a missed game. That's a governance failure. That's a failure of the league to maintain appropriate standards for professional athletic competition. That's a failure that has direct consequences for a player's career, for a team season, for the competitive integrity of the league. And the thing that bothers me about this situation is that we don't actually know yet. We're in limbo. Kelsey Mitchell could be fine. The medical tests could come back clean. She could suit up on Thursday and play in Dallas, and this whole thing becomes a funny story about Caitlin Clark making a joke about Canada. Or the medical tests could reveal something concerning. The team could decide to be cautious. She could miss games. Her historic scoring streak could end. And when you look back at the cause, the root issue, you realize that it was preventable. It was something that shouldn't have happened if the facilities were properly maintained. That's what makes this situation so serious underneath the viral moment. That's what makes Caitlin Clark's joke about air conditioning so much more than just a joke. Because by Thursday night in Dallas, we're going to know whether Kelsey Mitchell walks onto that court or whether a broken thermostat in Toronto cost the Fever one of the greatest scoring runs this league has ever seen. That's not a joke. That's a real consequence. That's a real issue with real stakes. And that's why this story matters, way more than anyone is willing to admit right now. So here's what you need to take away from all of this. Caitlin Clark made a viral joke about air conditioning. It was funny. It was clever. It deserved to go viral. But underneath that moment is a serious medical concern about a player with documented risk factors being exposed to environmental conditions that can trigger a life-threatening condition. Underneath that moment is a league in the middle of expansion growth that can't seem to maintain basic facility standards. Underneath that moment is strategic pressure being applied through humor instead of formal channels. By the time you're watching this, you might already know whether Kelsey Mitchell played in Dallas on Thursday. You might already know whether her historic scoring streak continues or whether it ends in an overheated arena. You might already know whether this became a real crisis or just a funny story in retrospect. But regardless of how it resolves, the larger issue remains. The WNBA needs to take facility conditions seriously. The league needs to guarantee that arenas are properly maintained. Players' health and safety need to come before convenience and cost-cutting. That's not negotiable. That's fundamental to professional sports. Caitlin Clark said what needed to be said. The question is whether anyone's actually listening.